Horror games have come a long way, from pixelated 2D sprites haunting tiny screens to fully immersive first-person VR experiences that immerse players in darkness. What started as simple scares has evolved into something much deeper as time has passed. It began with games like Sweet Home, which was released in 1989. Sweet Home was a Japanese RPG that laid the groundwork for what would later become the horror genre. Its influence would stretch far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Then came Alone in the Dark in 1992. Its use of fixed camera angles and polygonal 3D world introduced a cinematic quality to horror games, limiting what players could see and forcing them to imagine what was hidden out of frame. But really, it was games like Resident Evil, which released in 1996, that truly brought horror to the forefront of gaming and solidified the genre as an important one. Using its tight corridors, grotesque creatures, and limited resources, every step felt like a risk, and every corner felt like a potential death sentence. In the early 2000s, games like Silent Hill took a different route to horror. This franchise introduced a new kind of horror to the more mainstream part of the genre. Konami, the developers of Silent Hill, shifted the focus away from jump scares and explored psychological horror instead. Imagery like their foggy towns, haunting symbolism, and the unsettling soundscapes worked together to stir a deeper, darker, and unshakable feeling in their players. Other titles, like Fatal Frame, made players face their fear head-on, armed with nothing but a camera. This decision was made to make the player feel vulnerable, as they would have no weapon to fall back on, like in many other games in the genre. As technology improved, so did the tools that developers use to create scares. Advanced enemy AI, lifelike animations, and chilling audio design brought new levels of realism. This allowed horror to be more than seen, but also felt. In the 2010s, we saw the Amnesia franchise push horror further into the mind. It introduced feelings of claustrophobia, helplessness, and feelings of dread. Again, with no weapons to defend yourself, and therefore no fighting, the only hope was that you could stay quiet long enough to survive. Horror game development wasn't just possible by big companies, but also made by smaller indie companies. This not only allowed new developers to establish themselves, but allowed for a more personal, intimate horror experience that sometimes the larger budgets can't replicate. This creativity not only helped shape the genre, but opened possibilities for other, smaller game creators to thrive.
Oh, come on, dude! 6 a.m.! I'm gonna die. I'm dead. Ah!
With the rise of YouTube Let's Plays and live streaming on Twitch, horror games were able to become a shared experience. Titles like Five Nights at Freddy's and Phasmophobia turned fear into entertainment. Viewers laughed, screamed, and bonded with their favorite creators as they both got to explore the unknown together. And nowadays, immersion is king. With the rise of VR, players don't have to just witness horror, they get to live it too. Resident Evil 7 is a game that can be played in VR and throws the player right into the terrifying hallways of a run-down family house. Also, titles like Phasmophobia makes it possible to experience VR horror with friends as you try to survive an angry ghost. And all of these evolutions bring us to a new horror experience, one that builds on the legacy of the genre, but also pushes it to new dimensions, literally. In our IMD capstone game, The Space Between, you play as a mechanic who is dispatched to a space station when you get an alert that something has gone wrong. But when you arrive, things are off. The Intervalum, the space station you're fixing, is quiet, empty. It's lifeless. While attached to a real-life heart rate sensor, you go on with the job at hand. Our sensor takes your heartbeat, which then affects the in-game environment around you. So, you go ahead and do your job anyway, because what else is there to do? But then the unease sets in. After completing the maintenance, you come into contact with an alien life form, a mimic. Mimics are creatures that blend into the environment, hiding in plain sight. That chair, that box in the corner, the batteries you need for survival, you never know what's real. And our game echoes the fear of the unknown, that feeling that was pioneered by games like Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil, forcing our players to question the environment that surrounds them. But just when escape seems impossible, the player discovers a device that introduces the core part of our gameplay. This device, the Dimension Shifter, lets the player shift into a different reality where other aliens lurk. The audio and visuals of this dimension very much inspired by the psychological tricks that Silent Hill uses. So safety is never guaranteed aboard the Intervalum. In this alternate dimension, a tyrant-like entity known as the Thing roams. It doesn't hide, it hunts. It brings the same dread that we've seen in Alien Isolation, or from Resident Evil's Nemesis. Just like in those games, you can't kill this threat. You can only run. What sets the space between apart is how it uses the player as part of the game's mechanics. When your heart races, so does the game. Enemies become more aggressive. The world moves differently around you. Lights flicker, pipes burst. Fear isn't just simulated anymore, it's measured. It's reacted to. Just like in Fatal Frame and VR games like RE7, we remove the barrier that separates the player from the screen. The space between tears down that wall by immersing you in a horror that responds to you. So from pixelated ghosts to invisible threats, from visual to psychological horror, then to our biometric immersion, our capstone game, The Space Between, is here to bring something new to horror, and it reminds us that your fear is the loudest when you're alone. Now, with the evolution of technology and the tools and knowledge that we've gained throughout our time in the IMD program here at Carleton University, we set out to create something that was unique and more than just a game. We aim to create a true, conscious experience of fear, one that you can feel. We built The Space Between with systems inspired by the greats, survival mechanics like those in Resident Evil, the resource management that forces players to balance their health and their flashlight battery. Every choice becomes a gamble, every flick of your flashlight a decision between the safety or the dark. But survival is more than just resources. It's also about knowing when and how to escape difficult encounters. The Dark Dimension offers temporary relief from the invisible mimics, but puts you into chase with the Thing, an insatiable predator that never stops hunting. Powered by custom-made enemy AI, the Thing stalks the player, relentlessly following them while they're in the other dimension, the dark. To do this, we use topics that we learned from our AI and Intro to Game Dev courses to really bring the terror to life. Meanwhile, our mimics use a Boyd's algorithm-based AI system, flocking together, circling the player, and striking as a coordinated attack. Their aggression increases based on heart rate and how many fellow mimics are around them. But what truly sets our game apart is how we bring players' heart rate feedback into the game. Through an Arduino and pulse sensor, we create a serial connection to feed the player's real-time heartbeat into the game. To pull this off, we use the things that we learned from our physical hardware class and our Design Studio 3, where we had to create a game controller. Instead, this time, we opted for an accessory instead of a controller. The faster your heart beats, the more dangerous the world around you becomes. The enemies grow more aggressive, the environment reacts, and LED feedback adds an extra physical layer. Visually, we leaned into the uncanny. Our low-poly models with low-resolution textures were a deliberate and a stylistic choice to make the world feel off and unfamiliar. It's also a nod to past games, where the limitations in graphics helped create unforgettable horror. Our game doesn't just rely on enemies. We use environmental horror too. Sudden bursts of steam, sparks from fuses, falling or breaking objects. These are moments that are meant to keep the player on edge. Lighting too was an important tool for making horror work. Small spaces, dim or dark lighting, claustrophobic spaces. The flashlight is your lifeline, but if you run out of battery, you're stranded in the dark. We designed these effects with intention, using skills from our design studio, animation, and game dev courses. Even our UI supports the horror. Designed to match the player's suit, it's minimal but it's atmospheric, grounding the player in their role while reinforcing the setting. A decision we made thanks to what we learned in our human-computer interaction courses, as well as our UI and UX courses. And then there's sound, a vital part of horror. We use many sounds across our game to make it feel more alive. Everything from the screeches of enemies to the hum of the ship, and everything in between. Even the click of your own flashlight is there to add tension. Every sound in the game is there to reinforce the feeling that you're not just playing a game, but you're surviving this immersive experience. With the space between, we wanted to go beyond horror genre conventions and take lessons from the decades of games that have come before. And using our combined 4 years of education in the interactive multimedia design program at Carleton University, we wanted to create something that combines everything we've learned from UI design to game design, audio design, modeling, programming, animation, research, and user testing. So we thank you for visiting the Intervalum, and thank you for joining us on this breakdown of horror as a genre, and the game that we're proud to call our own, The Space Between.